Welcome to EPG Padashala. I am Professor B. Hariharan from the Institute of English, University of Kerala. The paper that we are looking at is 20th century English literature, and the module is on Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. Let's begin. Samuel Beckett is an Irish novelist, poet and playwright. He wrote in English and French. He is an avant-garde writer who was influenced by James Joyce's literary style. Waiting for Godot, which was premiered in 1956, was his first and most famous play. He won the Nobel Prize in 1969. His important works include, in prose, Proust. He has published 3 novels, Murphy, Malone and The Unnamable. His collection of poetry includes Echoes, Bones and Other Precipitates. The important plays include Waiting for Godot, 1956, Endgame, 1957, Krapp's Last Tape, Happy Days and Play. What we can do now is to have a general awareness of absurd theatre and understand something of the avant-garde quality nature of modern drama. We will also try and identify various themes that are incorporated in some of these plays. We will also look at the language, form and content in modernist literature, particularly theatre, and analyze the relevance, the universal relevance of these plays today. We will begin with the term absurd. This is a central concern in post-World War literature. This is a word that we come across when we read The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. I assume that all of you know the story of Sisyphus, who was cursed to roll a stone up the hill, and when he reached the top, the stone rolled down. This was made into a narrative by none other than Albert Camus to talk about the futility of living in this world, the futility of all endeavor and all effort. Now, Sisyphus myth is used by the absurd playwrights to parallel, to highlight man's futile quest to understand the absurdity of human existence. Now, the term, the theatre of the absurd, was coined by Martin Esslin, and he used the term absurd to label this innovative, unconventional modern play. But then he also goes on to talk about how these absurd plays go back and use many of the conventions with which the English theatre had developed. This is in a way a compulsory or a must read for any student of contemporary or 20th century drama, Martin Esslin's Theatre of the Absurd. I would urge the student here to read this book. The book also talks about the plays, some of the absurd plays that you have to study in your course. Now, I would now talk about, very briefly introduce some of the major absurd dramatists. Samuel Beckett is one, Jean Genet, Eugene Ionesco, Arthur Adamov, Tom Stoppard, Harold Pinter. There are a number of these plays. We will now very briefly list out some important plays that came out. Beckett's Waiting for Godot, Jean Genet's The Maids, Eugene Ionesco's The Bald Soprano, Adamov's Ping Pong, Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and there are many, many more. The list is only very limited. I urge you to take up the Martin Esslin book to understand more about these plays, the list of these plays, and at least know something about what these plays engaged with. We will now look at some of the features of absurd drama. As I said, Martin is, when I talked earlier, I was talking about the unconventionality of this. But then, it is generally believed that these plays violated the traditional principles of theatre. What are the traditional principles of drama? We would talk about plot, we would talk about a rising action, we would talk about the climax, the falling action, the denouement, etc. We talk about the development of plot, the development of story, action. We talk about how it has a neat structure, things happen, events happen. We talk about catharsis. We talk about recognition, reversal. We talk about events and incidents that happen. But then, when you watch an absurd play, you will not be able to recognize or even identify many of these things because they simply do not have it. Their intent, their purpose is something else. Another feature of absurd drama is that there is no coherent story. If you look for a story, you are doomed, you will not get it. There is no well-made plot. The dialogues are fragmented. It could be meaningless sometimes. There would be cliches. There would be nonsense that is bandied. You would have noises. You would have silence. You would have pause. In other words, language in these plays is a tool of non-communication. These plays project an element of fantasy, and they abound in black humor. I hope we all know what black humor is. It's dark. It's not funny. It could be a very funny situation, but then you will not feel like laughing. There could be futile actions. A drama, you watch something, and if you want to call that a drama, a play, then it will be dependent on action. But then the actions here in these plays would be futile. The settings are bare, they are desolate. The characters are like puppets. Often they are helpless, and maybe they become helpless victims of cruelty, helpless victims of fate that is cruel. The thing that to emphasize here is that you will always have victims, and they will invariably be helpless. You will also have fluid, indefinite sequence of time. Time is a very important factor in these plays. There is great fluidity, and the sequence could be indefinite, and it can emerge. It very often becomes a major trope in these plays. So the idea of time that you have here is not the kind of time that we are familiar with when we let's say read Greek tragedies or French plays, the traditional French plays, or the Elizabethan playwrights, or even the plays that came up after that. The sense of time here is something else. The dominant themes in absurd drama, a very prominent theme in absurd drama has to do with anxiety and alienation. Now, to understand why is it that we have these themes, when we ask this question, we will have to go back to the times when these plays were written. There was this existential or even philosophical crisis at the turn of the 20th century. Nietzsche, in his Thus Spake Zarathustra, had talked about the death of God. There were no verities, no certainties. The war created an intellectual crisis, so to speak. You are cut off from roots, you are cut off from your moorings. That's when existentialism as a philosophy came up. alienation and anxiety became a relatively modern phenomena, and this was a theme that recurred in the 20th century, particularly in its literary expressions. What is anxiety? Anxiety was simply that unfocused and unnecessary worries that we had about life. There was this big worry that we had about failure, about things that you could look forward to. There was nothing that you could even hope for, and this was anxiety. And what was the result of this anxiety and alienation? It was simply estrangement, which resulted from this inability to adapt to one's circumstances. Now, this became so very compelling that you had nowhere to turn to. You had no support. You couldn't look up to anything. You were alienated from your surroundings. And that's when you started thinking that you are condemned to be free. In other words, this anxiety and alienation translated itself into the condition, to this condition of the absurd. And this is what you were living through. There was this dailiness, there was this repetition which you were not able to come to terms with, and you did not know what to do with your life. And this is how it became the situation of Sisyphus. When you look at the play, it has 6 characters in it. Well, that is a significant number, but out of this, only 5 characters appear on stage. They are Estragon or Gogo, Vladimir or Didi. There's a character called Lucky, and there's another character called Pozo, and there is a boy. The boy is not recognized in this play by any name. He's only the boy. And there is Godot. Godot never appears on the stage. Godot is referred to in the play. There is nothing else that we know. We never see Godot. No one in the play sees Godot. The play is a tragicomedy, as I said, in 2 acts. Now, why is it called a tragicomedy? Now, this is a question that you will have to ponder as you read the play. The setting of the play is a deserted country road. There's nothing else. There is a tree that is bare, and there's a deserted country road, and it's wild. This is the bare outline setting of the play. It's evening. As the play opens, the first act, it's evening. There's a lonely country road. There's a leafless willow tree. There's a mound of dirt. We have 2 middle-aged tramps who are dressed in rags. Estragon, we see Estragon as the play opens, trying to pull on his boots, which are very tight. He is hard bent, he is intent on that. At that point, Vladimir soon joins him. And then you hear these words, nothing to be done. Imagine opening a play with these words, nothing to be done. And then these 2 men, Estragon and Vladimir, discuss Godot. They talk to each other and they say that they are here waiting for Godot. This sets off the tone of the play. So they discuss, they tell each other that they are waiting for somebody. And they also remind themselves that there is nothing to be done. And they while away time by pulling on the boot, exchanging hats, their stick, pulling up their trousers, trying to munch carrots, and they even end up playing games. When you read the play, you will wonder, what is this about? Is this a play? What are these people saying? The dialogues will sound to be meaningless. There is no serious action. Nothing happens in this play. There are, but if you are a careful reader, when you read it, you would find that there are biblical references to the gospel. There are specific references here to the crucifixion of Christ between two thieves, where one attains salvation, the other is damned to hell. It's so rich in that sense. This text is so much layered. As this goes on, Pozo enters. Pozo is a very affluent, a very rich man. He is a landowner who abuses his servant Lucky. Now this is how he comes. So Pozo is apparently plump and Lucky is not all that plump. He is very lean. And Pozo has a whip with which he beats his servant. Now you have here the master-slave relationship symbolized, presented here by Pozo's whip, and there is a rope around Lucky's neck, and you have Pozo pulling the rope and Lucky in the front and Pozo behind him. And so there are some of these instructions that Pozo barks at Lucky. Stand, sit, walk, come, eat, give. There are these one-word commands and Lucky obeys. In this act, Lucky does not open his mouth till he is asked to. And at one point, Pozo asks him to speak, and he speaks. He speaks like a programmed robo or a computer, non-stop. After this, they leave. The two men leave, and then they are still waiting. And the boy, there's a boy who comes here. He is a messenger, and he gives a message. What is the message? Godot will not come that day. These are two men who are waiting for Godot. Mr. Godot told me that Godot, he will not come today. Now the two men, Didi and Gogo, Estragon and Vladimir, debate. What should we do? Should we leave or should we wait for Godot? They debate, and the first act ends there. The trams do not move from the place. In other words, there is no progress in the action of the play. This is one element of absurd drama. There is no progress. The play, at the end of the first act, we find these two men standing there. Nothing much has happened. They have whiled away their time. They have nothing else to do. They play games. They play different kinds of games. These games are very interesting because they take you back to some of the things that we might have watched as children in films. One needs to think of the films of Charlie Chaplin, for example. Now, it goes back, some of the actions in this play goes back to the films of Charlie Chaplin. It will go back to the slapstick comedy of clowns in the circus. Think of the clowns. What they do, they will have a stick and it will be split in the middle, and with this they will beat the other person. It will make a sound. That is a slapstick. So what you have here is Beckett borrowing from many of these sources, and yet nothing happens really in Act 1, and there is nothing to be done. Shall we go? Yes, we can go, but then they do not go. Nobody comes, nobody goes, nothing happens. It's awful. Now this is the refrain that you have in the play. Now let's look at what you have in this act. This, whatever we have seen in the first act, is a vivid portrayal of human suffering. The scene seems to highlight the sad state of modern man. These characters that we see in the first act are modeled on post-war modern society. There is suffering from anxiety, there is loneliness, there is alienation, there is depression, there is insecurity. They are all there, and they are all communicated to you without much happening really on the stage. In other words, you have that condition presented as it is on the stage. You are not told about the condition is presented to you as it is. Now this is what the play does. The second act opens. The background is the same. Nothing has changed. There's only one difference. This willow tree has sprouted a couple of leaves. Now, can we see this as a symbolic change in the situation? We will have to wait and see. Now, Estragon has forgotten the events of the previous day, and Vladimir tells him, didn't we come here? Didn't we wait here? Didn't we wait for Mr. Godot? He did not come, that's why we are here. He reminds him all these things. And now these two tramps spend their time staring at a distance, and they indulge again in nonsensical chat and actions which do not mean much. So, in other words, the action, the sequence is not significantly different from what we witness in the first act. Now, what happens is Pozo and Lucky enter. There's a slight difference here again. Pozo is blind. Lucky is dumb. He cannot speak. Remember, in the earlier act, Pozo was active. He could command, and Lucky gives this speech which is breathless. Now we have the dumb slave still faithfully looking after his blind and abusive master. And yet there is no change in the situation. You have these two tramps waiting for Mr. Godot. This act also takes up this endless waiting, and this continues. Waiting, this waiting is the ing form of the verb wait, and waiting continues, and that's how the play ends. Now there what happens is the boy comes and says, look, Mr. Godot could not come today, maybe he'll come tomorrow. So nothing much has happened. Now we will look at the two characters, Vladimir and Estragon. Now it's very difficult to talk about characterization in the conventional sense of the term when we look at a play like this, and I am sure that this would be kind of clear to you. You will probably even be wondering, what play is this? But then when this play was performed in a prison in France, this was written first in French, the hardcore criminals in that prison were all able to relate to this play. The play did communicate something to each one of them. So let us now look at the characterization. Vladimir is the assertive of the two. He has a good memory of events. He has some empathy in him. He is the one who protests at the way in which Pozo treats Lucky. He very much believes that Godot will come to save him and his friend. Estragon, on the other hand, is timid and submissive. He is forgetful, he is dreamy, he is a very sensitive man, he is at the same time unpredictable, he is not very certain about the existence of Godot. So you can see the contrast here, and places where the two meet, or the way in which one person completes the other person. He has an obsession. His obsession is to take his boots off and on. That's his obsession. So these are the two main characters, so to speak. We will now look at Lucky and Pozo. Lucky is the slave. He is slavery, symbolized by a rope around his neck, and he carries the burden without any resistance. He is mute in the second act. He is a loyal, at the same time passive servant. Now, Lucky can be seen to represent or present modern man enslaved by suffering. Now, these features that we are trying to talk about are by no means definitive. We cannot say that this is what they mean. Beckett was once asked in an interview what he meant by this play, and he said, "If I knew, I would have said that." Let's come to Pozo. Pozo is a very rich landowner. He is a figure that we would instantly dislike. He is abusive. He uses the whip to control his slave. He is blind in the second act. There is no change in the relationship that he has with Lucky, his slave. He portrays tyranny. The boy who appears twice, very briefly in the act. First act he appears once, and the second act also he makes a brief appearance. He is a messenger. He is the only person who is supposed to have a contact with Godot. We don't know who Godot is. So he is the only person who has some contact with Godot. He comes at the end of both the acts, and he delivers only one message: Godot will not come. And there is Godot. Godot is perhaps the only source of salvation. Godot could be another form of God. Godot is invisible throughout. You have no information whatsoever on Godot. Godot could symbolize many things. He can be, to give one instance, he can be a symbol of meaningless waiting. He can be a symbol of faith, he can be a symbol of hope, he can be a symbol of many things. It all depends on how you choose to, how you want to look at him. This is Godot for you. What are the themes that we have here? Alienation, suffering, anxiety, boredom, friendship, expectancy. Positive? No. Vain expectancy. Waiting is a theme. Denial, nihilism. It's up to the reader or a person who has watched this play to come up to discover many more themes. What I have indicated are a few of them. Now, before we conclude, this play has been translated, presented in many languages. It's a test for actors to mouth these lines because of the silences and the pauses that you have here. This is a play that will be effective on stage only if you are an actor who knows, who has a sense of timing and who does it well. This is a play that has been recorded. It's available in very popular websites. I would urge you to read the play first and then watch it. To conclude, Waiting for Godot is a mystery wrapped in an enigma. It signifies the eternal recurrence of human life. It talks about man's helplessness to to change his destiny. It's a very candid portrayal of modern society. I would like to conclude this lecture by urging you to look at this text and then see how you can relate to the condition that is presented in it. I hope you enjoy reading this play, and I hope you are able to think about this play. Thank you.